I am Rupali Narang, and I am here to present on the importance of Purple Team or the pillars of Purple Team and a threat index evaluation and how this helps a CISO of a particular organization. Few things about me. I'm very much interested into cybersecurity. I call myself as a technology geek, passionate for everything under cyber. As far as education is concerned, I have done my bachelor's in electronics and telecommunications, and I have been working with in IT from 2008 onwards. But cybersecurity is something that I started 10 years back. Uh, Everything coming from security operations or threat hunting, threat intelligence, blue team, red team, email security, and purple team. And most recently, I have been involved with SOAR and security validation. Have done some application security assessments in my past experience, but currently completely into cybersecurity operations. All right. Uh, the agenda that I am planning to have uh, is to understand the pillars of the purple team. I know this is uh, something that is being followed in each and every organization related to the cyber security when they want to make their security posture good and intact and to test them. So purple team is the new terminology. Using the purple team, I would explain the pillars around that and how, since I come from a financial services industry, how we use the purple team process and evaluated a threat index specific to our organization, focusing on some threat actors which are targeting financial industry. I will take an example or a scenario very much similar to what we conducted in our organization, and in the end, how this helps your CISO, how this helps to bring the metrics or the dashboards which help provide assurance to the compliance auditors and the regulators. All right. The pillars of the cybersecurity. Uh, okay. The first that I mostly say that the purple team, it is a collaboration between the red and the blue team. Red team offensive techniques, blue team defensive techniques. Uh, the purple team, it leverages the techniques from the offensive team or the red team, and they simulate the real world attacks and identify the vulnerabilities and weaknesses within their organization systems and processes, and they work in collaboration with the defensive part of the team members, which is the blue team, and to identify or to detect and respond to and mitigate, and they follow the incident response for those simulated attacks effectively. The bottom line to have this testing is to have a realistic testing which mimics very much to the real world attacks. Explain how this helps. uh, I mean, the real world attacks which ought to think very much like the threat actors and to simulate those attacks in your organization to see how your implemented security controls would respond, and what is the security posture of your organization. Um, the second thing about the pillar is the continuous security validation. The purple team approach emphasizes continuous testing and in the environment and the continuous improvement. These ongoing assessments and the red teaming exercise or the penetration testing to identify the security gaps and the weaknesses. The findings of these activities, they help the security team to evaluate their implemented security controls and to provide the defensive strategies for future, either to tune the existing implemented controls or to make it more robust. Um, the overall aim is to keep our crown jewels to be protected. The third pillar of the purple team that I understand is the collaboration. The collaboration with the red and the blue team. Just to give you an example, in our organization, we follow blue team meetings, we follow red team meetings, whatever test we conduct during our continuous security validation using either some tools or our independent testing, we find out all the gaps and we discuss that in our red teams. And in the blue team meetings, we discuss about what were the alerts that were generated and what all actions needs to be taken to fine tune those alerts and how to make it more robust. The fourth pillar of the purple team is the KPIs or the measurements and the tracking, the metrics and the measurement. The purple team, it establishes the metrics and measurement framework to evaluate the effectiveness of the security controls and the processes around it and the incident response capabilities of the organization. So the KPIs, they are very important to be formed and to be evaluated to track the progress, to measure the impact of the security initiatives, and to identify the areas for improvement, um, and to identify the gaps identification and for the mitigation. The fifth pillar that I understand around the purple team is for the risk based approach. The purple team adopts, uh, I think, whatever the gaps are identified and whatever the alerts are generated, they should be given a proper risk rating to have a risk based approach, and so that the organization can prioritize what all security controls to be fine tuned, or if there are any corrective actions to be taken against that, focusing on the issues which are the most critical risk for the organization at that point of time. The sixth and obviously another important pillar of the purple team is the communication and the reporting. Effective communication and reporting between the stakeholders, between the management, to have a very open discussion for the gaps is another important pillar around the purple teaming. So the objective for all these things is to have a resilient and a robust security posture around the security within the organization. Moving on. The another thing that I wanted to discuss today is the threat simulation exercise, which I think we were able to perform in our organization and which provided a very good value for us. Threat simulation exercise, for example, it is red team or any penetration testing. They simulate the real world or they mimic the real world attacks and assess an organization's security posture. Running these test plans for measuring the threat resilience. I keep on using the word threat simulation and threat resilience because threat simulation overall the end goal is to see how resilient your organization is or how resilient um, um, your implemented security controls are. So I keep on using this word between threat simulation exercise and threat resilience, and how the threat index of your organization, which we will discuss in next few slides, they keep on trending over time. So these exercises, they help identify the vulnerabilities and weaknesses in your system and the processes. A threat simulation index could potentially be a metric which is used, it can be used to evaluate the effectiveness or the success of the implemented security controls. Um, I the output of all this threat simulation exercise, or the which is the red team, which I consider as the first half of the purple team, is the red team. The output is a single percentage value like a threat resilience metric, which can also be represented as a dynamic MITRE attack heat map to see in your environment how the TTPs that are being followed by particular threat actors, they behave if unfortunately they get attacked, and in your organization, what is the heat map related to that? So output can be a detailed reporting about the performance of the EDR, SIEMs, and other tools. These outputs, they provide structured feedback to Intel, to Hunt, to Red, and to the content and engineering teams at the back end. Okay, so evaluating the threat simulation index specific to your industry. As I mentioned above, we within our organization we prepared a test plan. We first of all identified few threat actors, um, which were targeting the financial industry at that point of time, and using those. And understanding their TTPs, we were able to identify a few test actions or which were and mapping it to the MITRE attack. So it consisted of the test cases focusing on the TTPs used by the threat actor groups targeting into your industry. Like if you are coming from a health industry or the retail industry, um, you can think about what are the threat actors which are targeting that particular industry in the current point of time. Start working on those threat actors, TTPs, mapping those to the MITRE attack, and putting a test action or identifying some test plans for your organization. Second step was to targeting or picking the prominent TTPs that I explained. It helps to map the exercise with the industry standard MITRE attack. Uh, Here comes the red team, where we ran those test cases in a very realistic, very much near to our production environment within our organization, and the results which which the blue team or the controls of the security controls that were implemented or the tools, um, EDR tools, SIM, antivirus solutions, the WAF or the proxy solutions, we were able to evaluate what those security controls or how they are communicating or how they are presenting at the time of attack. And of course, we were able to evaluate our incident response alerts. And if there is something which went or pass through our environment, how we need to go back and fix those things. So it included everything which comes as a purple team. The first half is the red teaming, the second half is the blue team, and overall it gives security validation. The last step was to evaluate the threat index, which was total number of actions that I ran and how many of those actions got prevented or blocked, and how many of those prevented and blocked provided an alert to our environment. So it gave us a threat index for our organization related to those threat actors that we identified to run in our situation. Okay, so this was an example that I wanted to run through, since again, I took around 10 nation state threat actor groups which were targeting the financial services industry, um, Gamedron, APT28, APT29, Bizad, Spider, Trickpod, Zirconium, Vinti, APT41, Legeres, and Kimsuki. I studied their TTPs, not followed them, but I followed their TTPs, did some threat intel hunting and gathering, um, and identified what all test cases is something that we would want to run in our environment. So second step was to craft the test cases. Out of for these 10 nation state threat actor groups, we identified around 12 tactics from the MITRE attack framework. And out of that 12 tactics, we identified around 70 procedure test cases. We targeted some prominent TTPs of the above threat actors, mapped the TTPs with the MITRE attack framework, and we ran those test cases in realistic environment within our organization. Threat index, we identified the prevented or the block test and unblocked, undetected, unalerted test. We got a ratio of how many of the tests or the actions that we ran blocked, and how many of those actually created an alert in our environment, and how many of them went undetected. Calculated an index which I keep on using between index and metrics because this is one percentage value, and we keep on doing it like year on year, and we try to increase our security posture. We learn from what was not blocked earlier and how we can fix the implemented security controls at that point of time. We got those mitigations done, and I plan to run this test again this year so that we can compare between last year and this year what is our increased security posture and how much we have added to our security controls. Analysis: analyze the undetected and unblocked test, identify the gaps, evaluate the implemented security controls. Maybe there is an open firewall port which went without going through the change advisory board, or which was left open in the cloud by some developer, or there were some security group changes that happened overnight, and or there was some testing or training happening, and for which a particular port was opened and it stayed in an open condition. So there are many such gaps which were able to identify. Trust me, if I say that we were able to identify, it was really good for us. Improper proxy settings, incomplete EDR policies, improper WAF configurations, or unpatched system or unpatched vulnerability. The mitigation was we provided a risk rating for all the alerts or all the undetected or all the unblocked actions we identified, and we provided a risk rating. We took a risk based approach for them. Mitigation recommendations were given to the management, to the team leads, to all the stakeholders, and we set some separate time for them to fix those gaps. Here comes the next step. We reran the test to validate the newly implemented controls after the set time, when we got a confirmation that the changes has been done by the team, or by the stakeholders. We reran the test to validate the newly implemented controls, reevaluate the threat index score, and this is where the continuous security validation comes, to continuously increase the posture of your organization. So this is beyond index evaluation because it helps in continuously providing an outlook on the security posture, existing security posture, and how to make it more resilient, to make it more robust, because the threat actors, they are continuously evolving, and they are continuously changing their tactics. So we do need to keep evolving with them, keep on testing our environment. How do we perform against those actors? Okay, so this was my sample working papers. I wanted to bring this up so that the audience or the viewers, they understand this is how I identified some test scenarios. I mapped it to the attack tactic, and then I mapped them to the attack technique. Um, I removed the values from the prevented and detected, but of course they had some value. Uh, how many of those were detected? How many of those were prevented? And what were the detecting technology or the protecting technology in our environment that actually blocked and detected those tests? So this is just a snapshot of what we performed in our environment. To give an overview of threat actor group composition that I had, though I had already covered that, um, we took around 10 threat actors. Uh, Five of them were the nation state sponsored by Russia, as it was um, as they were being shown to be linked with. Three of the threat actors from the China, two of the threat actors we took from North Korea. And for the 12 tactics, I considered individually, I took for initial access around 6 procedures. So this is not a complete snapshot of all the tests that I have taken, but yes, for initial access tactic of MITRE attack, that is being followed by these threat actors. I picked 6 test procedures. Now, these 6 test procedures were sometimes getting overlapped with the different threat actors. So it was good. And that is also another thing that I took into consideration, that if there is some procedure which are being used by multiple threat actors group, so I can pick that and run those and see an overall situation. For the execution tactic, we had two. So privilege escalation 1, defense evasion 14, credential access 8, discovery 9, lateral movement 6. Now for the lateral movement, if you have an AWS environment, it also helps you identify the microsegmentation domains, how microsegmented is your environment or the different zones, and if you have connections coming from any B2B channels or B2C channels. So it does help to understand the microsegmentation controls or the security controls around that piece. Command and control, exfiltration, and impact. So in total, we conducted around 70 test procedures for those 10 threat actor groups. Okay. Uh, Before I go on, how does this help um, to your CISO? I wanted to discuss on few things about sample working paper is some generic discussion that it is not an easy to have a threat index metric, or it sometimes can cause a challenging way because you are self evaluating yourself. So it becomes very important that you are honest with yourself. Honest in a mean, I say, if a blue team runs it alone without a red team or vice versa, there is a risk that partially successful outcome will be reported as a successful or a false sense of security. For an example, I'll put some example over here. Uh, a credential harvesting is performed on a server and that is blocked, but it is not alerted. This should not be considered as a successful test, not yet, until some sort of alert is generated by SIM or the SOAR. So this is the sort of honesty that is required because this is a self evaluation. So it needs that you need to be completely honest, and this metric needs to be run every year so that it gives a resilient figure, and gives that feeling of how to improve more forward with the implemented security controls. Uh, Ideally, it is good if we can run a similar simulation exercise once per quarter, or on half yearly basis. But even if we run such index simulation exercise once in a year, it is good. It gives a good feeling of how security posture has improved from the previous years. Uh, okay, how this helps your CISO? So uh, in our situation, I can see that it ever since we have started discussing on the index driven defense, this means that one of the core objective of the adversary management program is to keep pace with the index year over year, and it has now been added as a key performance indicator of our threat resilience. And if a similar threat simulation exercise is being done for different departments, or if your organization is something that has geographical offices, and a similar threat simulation exercise is done for different geographical locations, it does provide a security posture idea that how a particular geography is performing as compared to some other geography, if you have a different security controls pertaining to that very geography. So this helps building dashboards comparing their business units or geographies, threat resilience metrics, and the threat index. The third is, suppose if you are planning for a product replacement or trying to do POC. So this evaluation does evaluate the platform replacement. Candidate tools are subject to demonstrating the test case outcomes, and it provides improvement. You can compare how your old tool was behaving in the similar situation and how a new tool is behaving in a similar situation. Is the new tool providing more alerts or more logs, or it is providing, or the earlier tool had a better capabilities, or is it just the new tool is providing more of the noises? Continuous security validation against nation state sponsored threat actor groups provide tangible evidence to validate implemented security controls and their effectiveness. And all these things, they do provide or bump up the confidence of the CISO in an organization. It, of course, it also helps ensure the compliance with the industry regulations, standards, providing assurance to the regulators, auditors, and the clients. It helps strengthen the organization's incident response capabilities, and it helps identify gaps in the incident detection, response, and the recovery. Um, I try to keep it simple and sweet because this is very much focused to the blue team, security validation, and the threat index. And I would love to answer any questions if there are any, but that is all from my end in today's presentation. I just received a question. Okay, so do you active track false positives, or do you set up tests for your teams to face the false positives? Yes, um, we set up tests for our teams to face the false positives, because it lets us know how active they are. We when I run such security validation program, honestly, it is only within our own team that they are aware. So we let them run, and we get to know, okay, they get alerted, and of course after that we can close those alerts saying this is a false positive. And we track those. We track the false positives, and try to fix those in our future simulation exercise to reduce the noise, and to reduce the false positives. Okay, what is the response to the false positive exercises for? Uh, so the false positives, we try to track those, and we work with our respective teams and with our vendor, or we try to tune our tools around to that. And uh, so mostly I would say the tuning is something that we perform around that in our tools, or tune our the processes. How often do you suggest doing tabletop or light versus heavy exercise? So the security validation exercise that we perform, uh, uh, which like a, or I would say like index evaluation. This is something that we have run so far only once, and I am planning to do it in July or next quarter somewhere, sometime. But it really added value. But otherwise, I keep on running our Purple Team tool, security validation tool, every week, and especially when there is any new threat actor. But this does not include any index evaluation, or this does not include any TTPs or mapping to the MITRE attack. But if there is any new threat actor which has come, we try to go back and run immediately in our environment. Just to give you an example, when Movit transfer was, um, it came out, I think I ran it within first 6 hours to see how much are we impacted, though we were not using it. But still, you never know, the TTPs keep on changing. It may be that some other software is getting affected. So every week, and if there is some O day, 0 day, we run it immediately. But the threat index simulation exercise or the metric calculation is done once in a year, if that answers your question. For InfoSec teams, that don't have a dedicated red and blue team and must handle all other infosec duties? How much time does it take to dedicate to this planning and reporting by percentage? So, Gary, this is very much similar to our organization. We are the same bunch of team members who work as red team, and we are the same bunch of people who work as blue team. So it's very common. And the percentage wise, as I said, in a week we have one day when we have meetings for our red team things, 1 hour per week, and for blue team we have again 1 hour per week. But the actual tools and actual test cases is something that I do within my team. Yes, of course, I take guidance and I take views of my members during those red team meetings. We chalk out a plan during the blue team meetings. We understand how our tools are implementing, but the actual testing is something that I perform. But 2 hours in a week and is something, because I understand we are just same group of folks um, doing the exercises. Um, yes, and the next part of it was planning. Uh, Planning and reporting. It takes a little bit time for me because by Friday I try to run a report so that the following week when we assemble together again for our blue team and red teaming exercise. So Friday second half is something when I try to finish my reports for the following week. So that is how I divide my work. Okay, another question that I have is, okay, so Andy is over here and he is my manager. Okay, thank you, Andy, for joining. And he is asking, Rupali could share a story about the stir we caused with Unit 42 with SolarWinds IOCs. Yes, thank you, Andy, for bringing that up. So, in a similar security validation exercise, when we ran some tests, which were at that time very, very new, and they were related to the SolarWinds supply chain attacks. I was running tests, and it happened that our firewall, the gateway firewalls, it started triggering some alerts on a continuous basis. And Unit 42 is the threat intel. By now, I think every one of you have identified what product I am talking, but I will still try to not take that name. But the threat intelligence group or vertical within that organization called my SOC manager uh, and asked that why that we are under attack, we are under ransomware attack, and this is SolarWinds supply chain attack IOCs we are seeing in your environment. And that is how we were able to validate even our vendors. We were even able to validate our partners that if or incident response team in their organization, that they immediately contacted us and informed that are we under any sort of ransomware attack. But then we clarified that this is something that we are doing testing on our environment. So that was really good, and our CISO was very happy, the management was very happy to see our testing test cases and the response from that we received from Unit 42. Thank you. More questions, please. How do you get C-level buy-in? So that is something, because I usually run those tests and we discuss within our team. Yes, of course, my direct management is involved, and they take those results to the senior management, that is the C level, and they keep them posted of whatever tools, and that is how we show them the return on investment that on the various tools that we have. And for any major changes, that is how they get to know that this is something uh, that is something that we need to do any changes, or we need to buy a new product for some evaluation. But these continuous testing, security validation, and continuous communication with the C management about the security testing that we do is something that has provided or taken us to a spot where we get attention from the C-level suite. And I can say it with confidence that yes, we do get attention because of all these efforts. We do red team exercise, blue team exercise, collaborations, and reporting, reporting numbers. And whenever there is a new 0 day, O day, or any vulnerability, it is like on my action plan to run those tests in 24 hours and release a report as soon as possible. So that gives us visibility to our senior management because of all these tests and reporting. Thanks for joining my talk, Tols.